First story. My dad sold my soul to the devil. My dad is what they call a macho man. All he wanted was sons. He lived and breathed for another Keller boy. Naturally, when my older brother was born, he was overjoyed. 3 years later, he begged my mom to have another son. When he found out we were twins, he was excited to have 3 sons. So when my brother and I came out, and he saw that I was a girl, he was despaired. I've always been his least favorite kid, and he never tried to hide it. While he named my brothers Anthony and David, which mean priceless and beloved respectfully, he named me Lilith, which literally means night monster. While my brothers and mom tried to soften that direct punch to the gut by calling me Lily, he insisted on us all calling me Lilith, so I could feel the disappointment that he felt the day I was born. Clearly, him and my mom did not stay married, and quite unfortunately, he signed for full custody when Anthony was 5, and David and I too. Things just got worse from there. If he took Anthony and David out to eat or to see a movie, I was to stay home. He spent all his time playing sports with my brothers, and wouldn't let me join even though I, as a girl, actually showed a genuine interest in what he was doing with my brothers. When I was 4, Dad got cancer, and from what I heard, it was supposed to be terminal. That's where the title of this story comes into play. Yep, he made a deal with Satan. 15 more years of life if he sold one of his children's souls, and, big surprise, he chose me. So once I die, it's off to hell, no matter how little I sin or how much I pray. The first time I remember something happening to me was about a month after my dad made that deal. I was in my tiny, cramped room, trying to sleep on a bed I outgrew years ago, while my brothers and dad watched a movie downstairs, when I saw it. This thing in my closet. It was pale, with gaunt, sunken eyes and a gaping mouth. Its long and bony fingers wrapped around my closet door. There was no question that this thing was a demon. I immediately cried for my dad, who stormed up the stairs and gave me a proper beating for interrupting his movie night with his kids. After that, he called me a little girl for crying and locked me in my room. As I cried all that night, the demon simply watched me from the closet, unmoving. Demons watching me were pretty normal from then on. Sometimes it would be the pale, gaunt thing in my closet. Other times a dark figure hovering over my bed, and on bad nights, a horned figure with glowing red eyes would stare at me, taunting me through the window. After a while, I stopped being scared of them. One night when I was 9, the gaunt creature was back in my closet staring at me while I read. He began to make this really weird growling noise, to which I shushed him. He then did something he never did before. While he would occasionally wrap his hand around my slightly ajar door, he never actually came out of my closet. Until that night. In one swift movement, he tore open my closet door and stood up fully, revealing he was taller than the ceiling itself. He bent his neck in an abnormal way to fit under the roof. I rightfully should have been shitting my pants at this moment, but for some reason, I just wasn't that scared. We locked eyes for a while, which was more awkward than scary, so I just went back to reading my book. He just looked at me curiously for a while, until my dad decided he wanted to be a horrible person again, and threw open my door to yell at me for something or other. The entire time the demon just watched. Thankfully my dad left after slapping me across the face, but I was crying again for the rest of the night. The demon, who now looked at me with something more than curiosity, looked back at my closed door, trying to see my dad. As I did nothing but sob, the demon just sat down beside my bed, towering over me. Neither of us looked at each other the rest of the night. I cried while he just stared off in the distance, but I wasn't alone, and that was all I cared about. From then on, things changed. I wasn't just not scared of the demons, I welcomed them. Especially the gaunt-looking one who sat by me that night. He would sit with me whenever my dad was bad to me, or whenever I had boy troubles at school. He never talked at me, and barely ever looked at me, but all I cared about was that he was there for me. I even gave him a name, Papa. I remember this one night. I was 14, and upset because Jacob, the boy I liked, didn't invite me to the Valentine's dance at our school. On top of that, my dad had gotten into one of his moods, and had thrown a chair at me. When I ran into my room, I was almost relieved to see Papa crouched by the closet. "Papa!" I cried, running to him. It was stupid, I know. I was calling a literal demon Papa, but I had nobody else. He was the only one who had ever shown me any sympathy. At first, he stepped back, but as I cried even harder, he looked at me in the eyes. Maybe for the first time since that night, he stepped out of the closet. Then he did something surprising. He hugged me back. As I felt his icy cold hands wrap around me, I should have been terrified, but I was filled with love. Love for finally finding a dad who loved me. But one night, as I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird for my school project, I made a mistake. Papa looked curious, so I decided to read out loud to him. I guess I made too much noise, though, because David opened my door. "Lilith, who the hell are you? What the fick is that?" He screamed, and my dad came rushing up. Papa couldn't hide in time, and now Anthony, David, and my dad all stared him down. He stood up, revealing his giant stature, and David began to cry, while Anthony froze in place and my dad ran off to get a vial of holy water he had kept by his bed ever since the deal was made. As I tried to run away with Papa, he stopped me and shook his head. We both knew it was too late. I cried as I hugged him goodbye, and as my dad approached us with the holy water and sprayed it on Papa, he let out a blood-curdling screech that could have been heard across the country. I watched in horror as Papa, who had stayed by my side all these years, faded to nothingness. "There," Dad said. "It can't hurt us anymore. Sons," he said, embracing David and Anthony in a hug. I just laid over Papa's lifeless body, uncontrollably sobbing. We were all so caught up in our own worlds we didn't notice something come up behind us. He was large, even bigger than Papa, and had 2 large horns, a goat's head, and a large stick in his hand. Dad turned around slowly, looking to this thing as he glared down at my abuser. "Your Majesty, we had a deal, Stanley. I granted you 15 more years of life on 2 conditions. 2. It boomed, and I noticed David had wet himself. "It was a misunderstanding, sir. My daughter—" "You were granted 15 more years of life, on the conditions that I get your daughter upon her death. And you never harm anyone ever again. Do you understand?" it asked. "Yes, and I haven't. Promise." The creature laughed. "First you break a promise, and now you lie to His Satanic Majesty himself. Seeing you have not only harmed your daughter her entire life, but have killed one of my best minions, you have broken my trust. I'm breaking off the deal." My dad got down on his knees. "No, please, I'll do anything," he begged. Satan looked at me. "There is one way. If Lilith, your daughter and the one you cursed, forgives you, I will set you free and you will live the rest of your life." My dad slowly turned to me and put on a smile. "Hey, Lily, what about it? Look at me. I'm your dad, your Papa. I raised you. Don't you love me? I'm your dad. For fick's sake," he said, getting more agitated as I stared at him. "It's up to you, Lilith," Satan said. I looked to Papa's body on the floor, then back to my dad. "Come on, you gonna believe Satan or your dear old dad?" my dad said, pleading to me. I glared at him. "My dad is dead, bitch. You killed him," I said. "I don't forgive you." And with that, Satan dragged my dad down to the netherworld. My brothers and I hearing his screams until it was far away enough that it faded away, to where he could never hurt me again. As my brothers cried in the loss of their dad, I walked back to Papa on the ground and kissed his forehead. "Goodbye, Papa. Thank you." Second story. When it's after midnight, we aren't allowed to go downstairs alone. The town I live in is nice enough. It's quiet, a little quaint. My dream is to move to the city once I graduate from college. I want a life where things are busier, more exciting, more alive. I live at home with my parents and my twin sister. Both of my parents are underpaid teachers, so our upbringing has been relatively modest. We've never been spoiled. We've always been told to work hard for every dollar, and gratitude for everything we have has been instilled in us since childhood. My parents must have worked really hard to save money throughout these years, because the house that we've lived in since I was a teen is pretty darn huge. Our tiny little town in general is relatively prestigious. I went online to search up the prices of houses in our neighborhood, and wow. So I do my part to extract wisdom from my parents whenever possible. Clearly, they know a thing or two about how to win in life. Of all of the things my parents ask of me and my sister, the rule they are the most stern about is, if you're going downstairs after midnight, you have to bring someone with you. Ever since we first moved to this house, they would remind us of this rule every chance they got. They'd randomly bring it up at the dinner table or before we'd go off to school. Sometimes, if they heard footsteps in the hallway at night, one of them would get up from bed and walk with us to wherever in the house we were going. The strangest thing about it was that me and my sister never really had any reason to go downstairs at night anyways. Our rooms, the living room, the kitchen, and pretty much everything else we used was upstairs. Sure, downstairs had a games room and some stuff we maybe needed to pull out from storage from time to time. But overall, I couldn't really think of a scenario where we'd need to go downstairs after midnight. My sister and I would ask my parents about it sometimes. Why do we have this rule? What happens if we break it? They would usually deflect, change the subject, or say, "We'll tell you when you're older, dear." As I got older and older, the fact that my whole family slept upstairs, in a large 2-story house, mind you, became increasingly weird to me. I was curious about what exactly was going on. So, fresh off my 20th birthday, I decided to conjure up a situation where I'd absolutely need to head downstairs after 12 a.m. "Mom, I left my laptop in the games room and I need to polish up a paper that I'm submitting tomorrow." Lame excuse, I know. She was skeptical and pushed back a little bit. "Can't I get up early tomorrow and finish up the essay in the morning? Why did I leave this assignment until the last minute?" I was able to assuage these questions pretty easily. I thought it was due 2 days from now. I thought my laptop was in my room. I'm a little bit stressed and I won't be able to sleep if I don't finish it, etc. So she ultimately obliged. We made our way down the small staircase and arrived at the door leading to the downstairs area. Before my mother opened it, she turned to me. "Okay, he's likely going to latch onto me. Make sure I don't open the door to the backyard, okay? Make sure I'm with you at all times. You can pull me if you need to." I thought she was kidding. She opened the door. Our downstairs area has another small living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway that leads to our games room and our storage area. I'd accidentally left my laptop in the games room, so as we entered, I immediately turned towards the hallway. I thought my mom would follow me. Instead, I saw her, just standing there, shivering, jittery. Her gaze was fixed on the window in the kitchen. It's a big window, with the blinds usually pulled up. The window was a peek into our large, mostly empty backyard. I looked at my mom confusedly, as she continued her uninterrupted stare. Slowly, she started walking to the door to our backyard. "Mom, what are you?" That's when I saw him, pressed against the window from the outside. His face was obscured by the darkness, but I could see his eyes, wide open. Wider than eyes should go, otherworldly. He looked focused, excited. My mom continued walking to the door. I grabbed her as hard as I could and pulled her away, back to the staircase leading upstairs. I closed the door behind us. It took my mom a moment to snap out of it. She spent another minute staring at the door to the downstairs area, meekly trying to open it and go back to where she was previously walking to. When she finally pulled herself together, "What the fick was that? Did you get your laptop, hun? Mom, what the fick was that outside the window?" Mom's reaction was weird, a mix of annoyance, concern, and fear. She finally responded, "Terrible things happen when we talk about him too much. As long as we go downstairs in pairs of 2, we're always okay. No one's let him in yet." And that was that. I continued asking her as we made our way upstairs, but she just flat out ignored me at this point. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to tell my sister, who was generally super carefree, but part of me thought that it'd only freak the hell out of her and achieve nothing. I tried bugging my dad about it, but he also deflected. At most, sometimes he'd say something like, "We just wanted to make sure we could give you and your sister a comfortable upbringing," and then walk away. What the fick? It's been 2 years since me and my mom went downstairs together after midnight. Since then, we've continued to follow the rule, and we'd thankfully never run into any problems. I've tried to convince my parents that we should think about downsizing and moving somewhere else, but they'd always say stuff like, "That isn't how this works, dear, and as long as we play it safe after midnight, we'll be okay." That brings me to why I'm writing this today. My parents have been gone for the week, visiting family in another state. My sister left earlier this evening to go to a sleepover with her best friend. I'm home alone, for the first time in forever. I don't usually have my phone on me. It takes me a couple of hours, at least, to read and respond to text messages. I've always been lazy about it. I recently took a look at my phone to see a missed text message from my sister. "Hey, I might have accidentally left the downstairs door open, just for your information. Please close it whenever you get a sec." She sent this text message 4 hours ago. I read it at 10 minutes past midnight. I'm writing this from the closet in my room. So far, I think I'm okay. Maybe she's misremembering and she kept the door shut. The only thing I'm worried about is that I'm starting to shiver a little bit. And I have this inexplicable urge to get out from my hiding spot so that he can find me. Third story. I found a treehouse in the middle of the woods. When we were kids, growing up in the small town of Harvest Ridge, we found a treehouse. It sat shrouded in the heart of the forest that our parents had always warned us about, the Whispering Woods. Our gang, consisting of me, Maddie, Sarah, and little Timmy, were always looking for adventure, and the allure of the forbidden was too much to resist. It was a crisp October afternoon, the time when the leaves were changing, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson. We'd promised to stay near the edge of the woods, but youthful curiosity is a powerful thing. The sight of the treehouse, nestled in the gnarled branches of an ancient oak, was the most magical thing we'd ever seen. Guys, think of all the cool stuff we can do up there. Maddie was the de facto leader, his bright blue eyes always full of mischief. Are you sure we should? Sarah, ever the voice of reason, asked, her brown eyes flicking between us nervously. Timmy just clutched his teddy bear tighter, his tiny body trembling. Ignoring their reservations, I stepped forward. Let's just check it out. We'll be back home before dinner. The climb was daunting, the wooden rungs creaking ominously under our weight. But when we finally scrambled inside, it was like entering another world. It wasn't the cozy den of childhood dreams we'd imagined. Instead, it was a stark, grim place filled with strange symbols etched into the walls, dark stains on the wooden floor, and an unsettling stone altar in the center. Guys, this doesn't look right, Sarah said, her voice a bare whisper. What's all this stuff? Maddie asked, poking at a pile of odd, bone-like trinkets. And then, Timmy screamed. He was pointing at a corner, where a crude drawing depicted a monstrous figure, surrounded by smaller, kneeling figures. Beneath the drawing were words, scrawled in a dark, rusty color. The chosen must feed the silent one. We left the treehouse quickly, fear replacing our initial curiosity. We promised each other we'd never go back, and for a while, we kept that promise. But then, Timmy went missing. The town searched but found nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. We were devastated. But a nagging thought lingered in the back of my mind. The treehouse, one night, unable to bear the guilt and the uncertainty. I snuck out and returned to the Whispering Woods. What I saw there still haunts my dreams. The treehouse was glowing, a sickly green light pulsating from its windows. Hushed whispers echoed around the woods as cloaked figures shuffled into the treehouse. I hid, watching in horrified silence as the ritual unfolded. Their leader stood by the altar, a familiar teddy bear in his hands. The Silent One demands, "The chosen shall answer," he intoned, and the woods seemed to shiver in response. I ran, the image seared into my brain. The treehouse wasn't just a treehouse, it was a sacrificial altar, and we'd walked right into it. We'd given them their chosen, I told the others. We told our parents, the police, anyone who would listen. They didn't believe us, of course. They searched the woods and found nothing. The treehouse was gone, as if it never existed. All that remained was an empty clearing and the echo of our guilt. The town declared Timmy a lost cause, a heartbreaking mystery that would never be solved. The rest of us were sent to therapists, told we'd invented the whole thing as a way to cope with the trauma. But we knew the truth. Weeks turned into months, and then years. We grew up, but the shadows of our childhood lingered. We never spoke about Timmy or the treehouse, but it was always there, a silent specter haunting our lives. I eventually moved away for college, the need to escape Harvest Ridge overwhelming. But like all nightmares, it drew me back in. Maddie, the spark in his eyes long extinguished, called me late one night. "We found another one, another treehouse," he whispered, his voice trembling. "In another forest on the other side of town." My heart sank. "Maddie, we can't go through that again." I think I saw Timmy," he said, and the line went dead. Coming back to Harvest Ridge was like walking into a ghost of my past, a snapshot of a time that was both innocent and horrifying. The town was still the same, save for the haunted looks in the eyes of those who remembered what had happened. And Maddie, he was still there, rooted in our shared past, unable to escape the shadow of the treehouse. As for Sarah, she had severed ties with us shortly after we burnt the original treehouse. The trauma of what had happened, the loss of Timmy, it was all too much for her. She moved overseas, seeking solace in distance and disconnection. Her absence was a palpable void, a missing piece in our fractured group. With the news of the second treehouse, I tried to contact her, but my calls went unanswered. It was clear she wanted nothing to do with Harvest Ridge or anything that reminded her of our shared past. I couldn't blame her. If I could have escaped it all, I would have. But Maddie was here, and I couldn't leave him to face it alone. The sight of the new treehouse sent shivers down my spine. It was an eerie mirror of the first one, nestled in the foreboding branches of an ancient tree. The silence around it was suffocating, the air heavy with an unseen dread. The pulsating glow of the symbols seemed more potent, more threatening. It was as if the treehouse was alive, breathing, waiting. We were no longer the naive, adventurous children who first discovered that cursed treehouse. We were adults now, forged and hardened by the fires of our past. Our hands, once used for climbing trees and playing catch, now held cans of gasoline and bags of salt. We had done our research, read up on rituals and ancient cults, anything that might give us an edge. This time, we weren't going to be victims. We were going to fight. We waited, hidden in the underbrush, our hearts pounding in sync with the ominous drumbeat that echoed from the treehouse. One by one, the cloaked figures emerged and disappeared into the night, leaving the eerie glow of the treehouse behind. Maddie was the first to move. He approached the treehouse with a grim determination, his jaw set and eyes hard. I followed, every fiber of my being screaming at me to turn back. But we had come too far. We had to end this. Stepping into the treehouse felt like stepping into a nightmare. The symbols, the altar, the heavy air of malevolence. It was all as we remembered. But in the corner, a small figure huddled. Timmy. He looked just as he did the day he disappeared, his clothes tattered and dirty, his teddy bear clutched tightly in his arms. But his eyes, they were different. They glowed with an ethereal light, as though some strange power had taken residence within him. When he saw us, he didn't cry or call for help. He merely pointed to a chilling message on the wall. The Silent One is fulfilled. The Chosen will return. With Timmy safely in our arms, we escaped the nightmarish treehouse. We poured gasoline around it, creating a perimeter with salt, before setting the entire place ablaze. We stood there, watching as the unholy monument to the Silent One was swallowed by angry flames. In the days that followed, we took Timmy to the hospital. He didn't speak or react, his glowing eyes the only sign of the otherworldly presence within him. His parents, overjoyed and terrified in equal measure, thanked us for bringing their son home. But we knew, deep down, that Timmy hadn't really come home, not all of him. A month after Timmy's return, the hospital caught fire. It was a clear, calm night, with no sign of arson or electrical malfunction. Yet, the building burnt to the ground, an eerily familiar sight for Maddie and me. We rushed to the hospital, hearts pounding with a dread we knew all too well. The fire was relentless, an inferno that resisted every attempt to quench it. It wasn't until dawn broke that the flames finally died down, leaving nothing but ash and ruin in their wake. They never found any bodies, not a single trace of the patients or staff. The entire town mourned. But Maddie and I shared a silent understanding. The hospital, the fire, the missing people, it was all too familiar. It felt like the treehouse, the Silent One, all over again. When we returned to the site of the burnt hospital, we found one thing intact amid the rubble, a small burnt teddy bear, Timmy's teddy bear, and scrawled in the ash beneath it was a chilling message. The Chosen has awakened.